My mother-in-law expected me to pay for my sister-in-law's college tuition after I received a promotion at work. When I refused, she publicly humiliated me at my celebration, calling me a selfish miser. But things have taken a dramatic turn. Her own husband stepped in to defend me and exposed the real reason their daughter's college fund had vanished. Now that the truth is out, no one wants anything to do with her. A few days ago, my husband and I hosted a gathering at our home to celebrate my recent promotion. I had been working toward this for 3 years, and now that I had finally achieved it, it was a significant milestone for me. I won't get into the specifics of my new position, but it does come with a substantial salary increase. Although we hadn't shared the exact figures with anyone, my mother-in-law's first question after hearing about my promotion was about my new income. My promotion had been finalized about 2 weeks prior, and shortly after that, my husband and I invited our families over for dinner to share the exciting news. Everyone congratulated me, but my mother-in-law immediately and bluntly asked how much I was earning now. My father-in-law scolded her for being so direct, but I answered anyway. To be honest, I took the opportunity to brag a little, knowing that she has never truly liked or appreciated me. I wanted her to realize that whether she liked me or not, I was thriving. I won't lie, I enjoyed rubbing it in just a bit. She offered a forced congratulation and then went silent, so I assumed that was the end of it. But a few days later, on the night of my celebration, she pulled me aside for a private conversation. She said that after hearing about my salary, she had decided it was only fair that I take responsibility for my sister-in-law's college expenses, including tuition and living costs. Without hesitation, I refused. My sister-in-law and I are not particularly close, and even if we were, she plans to attend an out-of-state university, which would be extremely costly. That financial burden belongs to her parents, not me. My mother-in-law wasn't happy with my answer. She insisted that since I was earning so much now, I had an obligation to support the family and labeled me as selfish. I told her she could think whatever she wanted. I wasn't even going to entertain this idea and walked away to rejoin the party. I genuinely didn't expect her to make a scene, but she did exactly that. Back in the living room, she suddenly erupted, shouting at me in front of everyone. She ranted about how she regretted ever allowing her son to marry someone as self-centered and insincere as me. The entire room fell silent in shock, including me, because up until that moment, she had done a decent job of hiding her resentment. In 4 years of marriage, she had never caused a public scene like this, so no one saw it coming. I was at a loss for words, but she wasn't finished. She kept yelling, letting out everything she had probably been bottling up since I joined the family. My husband and I have been together for 6 years and married for 4, so I guess she had been holding on to this resentment the whole time. She just needed a reason to finally unleash it. She accused me of being the reason her son had distanced himself from his family. She complained that ever since we moved to the suburbs after getting married, she barely saw him anymore. But I have no idea why she blames me for that decision. It was something my husband and I agreed on together. He had always planned to move to the suburbs after marriage and had told her as much multiple times. Yet, instead of accepting his explanation, she insists on making me the villain. She then accused me of being two-faced, pretending to get along with my in-laws in public while secretly despising them, especially her. She even claimed that I constantly talked about her behind her back. To set the record straight, I've never done that. In fact, I don't even think about her enough to talk about her. Anyone who truly knows me can vouch for that. Up until this point, my husband and I had stayed silent, letting her rant with the intention of addressing everything at once later. But then she crossed a line. She called me a selfish miser, claiming that despite earning more than my husband, I made him pay for everything. That was yet another lie, and we were just about to speak up when my father-in-law stepped in. And honestly, I'm so glad he did, because what he revealed next caught all of us off guard. Before my husband or I could say a word, my father-in-law firmly told his wife to stop, saying she was embarrassing herself and ruining the evening for everyone. Until that moment, no one even knew what had triggered her meltdown. But instead of backing down, she turned her fury on him, shouting that she had no choice but to lash out because she had politely asked me to help pay for my sister-in-law's tuition, and I had refused, an act she saw as arrogant. That's when my father-in-law decided to drop a truth bomb. Since she wanted to discuss their daughter's college tuition, he said it was only fair to explain why there was no longer a college fund in the first place. My mother-in-law immediately panicked, insisting it was irrelevant, but he wasn't about to let her shut him down. Despite his anger, he still took a moment to apologize to us for the chaos and made it clear that it was never our responsibility to cover my sister-in-law's education. Yes, tuition would be expensive, but that was for her parents to figure out, not me. Then he revealed something that left the entire room in stunned silence. He had originally saved up a college fund for both his children, but a few years ago, he was forced to use a large portion of that money to settle a lawsuit, one that was entirely my mother-in-law's fault. No one in the family had known about this. At that moment, she suddenly burst into loud sobs, clearly trying to divert attention, but my father-in-law wasn't having it. He kept going. That's how we discovered something even more shocking. About 3 years ago, my mother-in-law deliberately tried to sabotage my marriage by pushing another woman onto her own son. I know it sounds insane, but it's the truth, and I still can't wrap my head around the fact that she actually did this. I remember that time vividly. A few years back, there was a woman who kept flirting with my husband, over text, in person, constantly. Even after he made it clear that he was married and not interested, she refused to back off. At first, we just laughed it off, assuming it was harmless, but over time, her persistence became concerning. It even got to the point where we started wondering if she was mentally unwell. The real issue was that my husband couldn't completely avoid her because she worked in his father's company. Eventually, he decided to speak to his dad about it, explaining that she was a junior in his department and making him uncomfortable. His father assured him that he would take care of it, but before he could intervene, the woman abruptly quit her job, and that was the end of it. Or so we thought. We had long forgotten about the incident until now, when we learned that my mother-in-law had orchestrated the entire thing. And honestly, that's the most disturbing part of all. Later, that same woman ended up filing a lawsuit against my mother-in-law, and in order to make the problem go away, my father-in-law had to settle with her, wiping out my sister-in-law's college fund in the process. I won't go into the specifics of that case right now, but if necessary, I can share more details later. For now, I want to focus on my mother-in-law. After my father-in-law exposed the truth, the entire room fell silent. My mother-in-law stood frozen for a few seconds before suddenly bolting out the door. My father-in-law didn't chase after her. Instead, he stayed behind and apologized to us, admitting that he should have told us everything sooner but didn't know how to do it without devastating the family. He revealed that he had already made my mother-in-law promise never to pull something like this again and even convinced her to start therapy, recognizing that she clearly had deeper issues. At that moment, my husband and I were at a complete loss for words. We told him we needed time to process everything, and after another round of apologies, he left. The mood had soured so much that continuing the party felt impossible, and guests started heading home. The only people who remained were my parents. Thankfully, my sister-in-law hadn't attended in the first place, so at least she was spared from the drama. Once everyone had left, my husband, my parents, and I sat down to unpack everything we had just learned. There was no question, what my mother-in-law had done, regardless of how long ago it was downright vile. None of us wanted to have any further contact with her. I didn't even have to convince my husband. He was already on the same page, saying he was so disgusted that he couldn't imagine speaking to his mother the way he used to. But there was another layer to this. While my father-in-law had always been good to us, he had also been complicit in keeping everything hidden. That realization made it clear that we needed space from his side of the family as a whole. So, for the time being, we decided to cut ties. A few days later, my father-in-law showed up at our house, asking us to speak to my mother-in-law. My husband and I immediately refused, but he insisted that she was ready to apologize and had been miserable ever since the party. He explained that they had gotten into a huge argument when they returned home, one so bad it nearly led to a separation. That, apparently, had been her wake-up call. Even so, we stood firm and told him we weren't ready. That's when he tried to guilt-trip me, saying that by refusing, I was no better than my mother-in-law. He claimed that her biggest flaw was her inability to give people a chance, and by shutting her out completely, I was doing the same thing. I saw through his attempt to manipulate me, but now I can't help but wonder if he has a point. Am I in the wrong for refusing to let her apologize? Also, since many people have asked about the woman my mother-in-law hired to try and tempt my husband, here's what really happened. I didn't include the full story in my original post because I was still gathering details, But now I have a clearer picture. The woman who worked under my husband wasn't just some random employee. She was coerced by my mother-in-law. I didn't fully understand the extent of it until my husband spoke with the family lawyer who had been involved in the case. That's how we finally got the whole truth. Apparently, my mother-in-law first noticed this woman at a work event hosted by my father-in-law. While no one else seemed to pay attention, she caught the woman frequently glancing at my husband. Instead of ignoring it, she took it upon herself to confront her, bluntly accusing her of having a crush. Though the woman denied it, my mother-in-law became convinced she had feelings for him. Having a crush isn't a crime. People are free to feel whatever they want. But my mother-in-law saw an opportunity and decided to exploit it. Somehow, she managed to get the woman's contact information and reached out with a proposition: flirt with my husband in exchange for money. The woman, understandably uncomfortable, refused. But my mother-in-law wasn't about to take no for an answer. She threatened to have her fired if she didn't cooperate. Faced with pressure and intimidation, the woman eventually caved. I don't know why she never reported it. Maybe she was scared or felt trapped. For a while, she played along, constantly pursuing my husband despite knowing he was married. At first, we laughed it off, assuming it was just a harmless crush. But over time, it became obsessive and concerning. My best guess: she eventually realized how toxic the situation had become, cut ties with my mother-in-law, and quit her job. Shortly after, she blocked my mother-in-law completely. A few weeks later, legal papers were served. That's when my father-in-law learned the full extent of what his wife had done. Rather than letting the case go to trial, they opted for mediation. To keep everything quiet, my father-in-law paid the woman a large settlement and had her sign an NDA. None of us ever knew about this, which makes it all the more unsettling, especially knowing that my father-in-law had been aware the whole time and never said a word. At this point, we don't feel like talking to him, either. Update 1. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and thoughtful comments. After discussing it, my husband and I have decided that we don't owe his mother anything. Not our time, not our attention, and certainly not a chance to explain herself. We have no obligation to listen to her apology if we don't want to, and quite frankly, we don't. I know some people might say I should at least hear her out, but after everything she's done, including her deliberate attempt to humiliate me at my own celebration, I have zero desire to face her. My father-in-law argued that refusing to give her a chance makes me just as bad as she is, but that's nonsense. She never gave me a chance simply because she despised me. I, on the other hand, have plenty of valid reasons to want nothing to do with her. That's a key difference, and if he can't see it, well, I guess that tells us exactly where his loyalties lie. It's been a week since the party, and surprisingly, several of my husband's relatives have reached out to show their support. Many have acknowledged how difficult it must be to uncover such disturbing truths about someone we once considered close. It means a lot to us, especially since my mother-in-law had always been pleasant with them while reserving her hostility for me. Still, they're standing by us and choosing to do what's right, which I know isn't easy for them. For example, my husband's family is putting pressure on us in different ways. His dad keeps using guilt trips to push us into hearing out his mother's apology, while his sister has been throwing tantrums over the whole situation. As I mentioned before, she and I were never particularly close, which was part of the reason I had no interest in helping with her college fund. If she truly needed my support, she should have come to me directly instead of expecting me to play along with my mother-in-law's manipulations. That was never going to happen. After my father-in-law's visit, my sister-in-law called my husband, furious. She accused him of being disrespectful to their parents and told him he needed to grow a spine and stand up to me. According to her, I had no right to insult the in-laws and just walk away from it. She also insisted that my mother-in-law's demand for me to fund her college tuition wasn't unreasonable because we're family, and it was my duty to support them. If I refused, then maybe I didn't deserve to be part of their family at all. She sees nothing wrong with what her mother did and doesn't even think an apology is necessary. My husband was furious and told her she had no business inserting herself into this mess. But since she insisted on making things worse, he blocked her. That didn't stop her, though. She started messaging him through her friends' accounts, which only made things more frustrating. The fact that she dragged her friends into our family drama was ridiculous and completely unnecessary. Eventually, we had to block her friends too, but she just kept making new accounts and email addresses to get through to us. Honestly, I don't understand why she's going to such lengths to prove her loyalty to her parents. No amount of sucking up is going to change the fact that her college fund no longer exists. If I were in her position, I'd be smart enough to at least apologize and try to get on good terms with us, especially if she was hoping for financial help. Otherwise, she'll just have to take out student loans and figure out a way to pay them off herself. It's obvious that picking a fight with us right now is a terrible move, but unfortunately, she doesn't seem to realize that. I guess critical thinking isn't a family strength, except for my husband, who has been incredibly supportive throughout all of this. I know it must be painful for him to see his family act so irrationally, but he hasn't let it show, not even once. Because of that, I don't feel guilty for cutting them off. I wish I could make things easier for him because he doesn't deserve this kind of betrayal. He deserves better people in his life, ones who actually care about his well-being instead of trying to sabotage him. The only reason we tolerated his mother's behavior for so long was because he wanted to maintain a relationship with his dad and sister. His sister always had an attitude problem, but we figured she was still young, so we didn't take it personally. And as for his father, we genuinely got along well, which makes his involvement in covering this up feel like such a deep betrayal. At least I have my own family to lean on, and so does my husband, thanks to his extended relatives who have been supportive. Still, I can't even imagine how painful it would be if my own parents put me through something like this. He's been unbelievably strong through all of it, and I'm so proud of him. More than ever, I know I married the right man. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been 3 weeks since my father-in-law last visited, telling us my mother-in-law had a heart attack and wanted to apologize. At the time, we weren't ready to hear her out. We just needed space, so we stayed firm on having no contact. To his credit, my father-in-law respected that and didn't try to reach out again, until now. A couple of days ago, he contacted us again, saying that since some time had passed, it was only fair to give my mother-in-law a chance to apologize. We still weren't interested because both my husband and I knew forgiveness wasn't on the table. But we also knew that if we kept refusing, they'd turn it into an even bigger issue. So, we agreed to let her come over and say whatever she needed to say, just to get it over with. When they arrived, my mother-in-law immediately launched into an apology, crying as she insisted she never meant any of it. She said she struggled to accept that her son had married someone she didn't approve of, and it made her feel like she no longer mattered to him. That, according to her, was why she was so against me. But now, she claimed to see the error of her ways and was willing to do anything to make it up to us. We told her we appreciated her apology, but for now, we wanted nothing to do with her. Apparently, anything didn't include giving us space to heal. She and my father-in-law started pushing back, saying that as parents, they made mistakes sometimes, but that didn't mean we should hold it against them forever. They acknowledged that we were hurt, but insisted they deserved a chance to make things right. Their entire argument boiled down to nobody's perfect, as if that somehow excused everything. I calmly reminded them that this wasn't some petty family argument we could just brush off. If it were something small, we would have forgiven them by now. But what they did was beyond extreme, and forgiveness, if it ever happened, would take time. They needed to accept that and move on. That's when my mother-in-law suddenly dropped the tears. She shifted gears, saying she was willing to take responsibility but that it was in the past, and I had no right to ruin the family over it. My father-in-law backed her up, and at that point I was done. If they weren't going to take real accountability, there was no point in continuing the conversation. I told them to leave. Instead of respecting that, my father-in-law turned to my husband, expecting him to do something about my so-called disrespect. But my husband stood his ground. He told them this was my house too, and since I was the one who had been disrespected the most, he wasn't about to override me. If I wanted them gone, they had to go. That's when things got ugly. They turned on my husband, arguing that he was too passive, letting his family fall apart. But he didn't care. He refused to entertain their guilt trips, so they stormed out, after cursing him out on their way. I don't regret inviting them over. If anything, I'm glad we did because it confirmed what we already suspected. Their apology wasn't genuine. If they were truly sorry, their actions would have reflected that. Instead, they tried to manipulate us into moving on for their sake, not because they actually cared about the damage they caused. But none of it matters anymore. We're done. And after today, I hope they finally realize that. Update 3. Hey everyone, It's been 7 months since I last interacted with my in-laws, and honestly, it's been peaceful. After I told them to leave my house, they never reached out to me again. They've continued trying to contact my husband, but he's remained firm. If I'm not speaking to them, he's not interested either. I've told him multiple times that if he wants to keep in touch with them, he can, because I don't want him to feel isolated from his family. But he refuses. He says he won't speak to anyone who hurt me, and he won't forgive them unless I do. It's honestly really sweet, and I appreciate him so much for it. Now, for the big news. We're expecting. I just entered my second trimester, and we announced the pregnancy on social media yesterday. In a couple of weeks, we're throwing a party to celebrate, and of course, his family isn't invited. The strange thing is that, after months of pestering my husband, they've suddenly gone radio silent. Not a single message, not even a simple congratulations. It's odd, but at the same time, it just proves they don't care about having a relationship with their grandchild. And that's fine by us. Even if they try to come crawling back, they won't be a part of our lives again. That's final. But aside from that, we're beyond excited about this new chapter. I know parenting will be an incredible journey, and I truly can't wait. Thanks to everyone who's been following along and supporting us. We appreciate you.